This is Who Let the Gods Out, Chapter 8, Patricia Horse's Bum. Patricia Portia Plum always got what she wanted. When Patricia was 8, she'd wanted a puppy. Her father, who had inherited his vast wealth from his great-aunt, told her she needed to learn the value of a hard day's work. So Patricia took all of Daddy's designer suits to a jumble sale and sold them for £10. Her father, a man who admired an enterprising spirit, happily bought her Bonnie, the puppy. When Patricia was 13, she wanted a pony. Her father, who phoned from the golf course to point out that we can't always have what we want, told her to contribute half herself. So Patricia sold Bonnie, pushed Daddy's red Ferrari off a cliff and instructed him how to spend the insurance money if he wanted to keep his Bentley. Her father, a man who wasn't sure about red anyway, nervously bought her Princess the pony. When Patricia was 20, she'd wanted a car. Her father, who'd retired at 35, tried to tell her to get a job. But as his daughter produced a box of matches and a petrol can in the drawing room, her father, a man who now feared for his life, simply handed over his credit card. Now Patricia was 40-something, but knew she could pass for 37. She wanted Home Farm. That vile farmhouse needed to be squished and the shed bulldozed, but it sat on a valuable piece of land that was ripe for development. Patricia could build dozens of overpriced houses on the plot and make a fortune. If only she could make Josie Hooper see sense. But that repugnant boy Elliot wouldn't let her near his mother, and Patricia was running out of patience. Patricia Portia Plum was not getting what she wanted, and this was unacceptable. Like anyone who has too much, Patricia had no sympathy for those who didn't have enough. She loathed poor people. Patricia treated poverty like most people treat a nasty stomach bug, a horribly catching affliction that necessitated plenty of hand washing. Besides, poor people only had themselves to blame. If you couldn't look after your money, you didn't deserve it, which left plenty for her. And those ghastly Hoopers were poorer than unemployed church mice. What made the situation even more intolerable was the fact that Patricia knew something fishy was going on. She didn't believe Elliot's excuses for one tax-efficient minute, and she was determined to get her hands on Home Farm. And that £20 the little blighter had stolen, Patricia Portia Plum might have deluded herself that she could pass for 37, but she wasn't stupid. Something was up. She just needed to find out what. Most normal people would have given up long ago. She'd been told many times that Home Farm wasn't for sale and that should have been the end of it. But Patricia Portia Plum wasn't most people, and she wasn't especially normal. Giving up hadn't won her the Pony Princess Rider of the Year, although giving all the other competitors food poisoning had helped, and she wasn't about to give up now. Patricia Portia Plum had waited long enough. So when Patricia saw Elliot leave Home Farm early that Saturday with a silver-haired girl, young people were so ridiculous with their hairstyles nowadays. A nice soft perm had done her perfectly well for years. She decided it was time to make her move. When opportunity knocks, answer the door were her father's last words before he died. Or at least she assumed he was dead. She hadn't seen him since the day she claimed he'd gone potty, stuck him in a home and taken all his money. There was no time like the present, especially since her electricity seemed to be playing up that morning. Patricia Portia Plum decided that today was a perfect opportunity to get what she wanted. Armed with a homemade Victoria sponge, well, the label said that someone had made it at their home. The moment Elliot was out of sight, Patricia made her way up that stupid path to Home Farm. As she knocked gently on the door, she imagined destroying the path with a pickaxe. "Cooey, Josiekins, it's Patricia," she chirped like a canary on a candy floss. "Fancy a cuppa?" The door opened a fraction and Josie Hooper's delicate face peeked out. "Hello, pumpkin," gushed Patricia with her least sincere smile. "Shall we have some cakey?" The mind is a complex machine, and although Josie's day-to-day memory had been getting worse, her long-term memory was as clear as spring morning. So despite Elliot's warning never to answer the door, Josie thought nothing of omitting her long-standing neighbour, like Grandma inviting the big bad wolf in for a granny sandwich. "Hello, Mrs. Horse's bum," she said cheerily. "Do come in." Even without the insult, Patricia thought Josie looked dreadful. She hadn't seen her for months, but really the woman was ageing horribly. That's what happened when you didn't spend money on expensive beauty creams that were packed with dioflavines enzymes to keep the skin firm. And Josie wasn't even dressed. Shuffling around in her dressing gown was a woman who had no shame. Of course not. She was poor. Poor people were so very, very lazy. Patricia entered the cosy sanctuary of Home Farm. As she looked around the cherished home stuffed with joyful mementos of the Hoopers who had lived there, she happily pictured the day the bulldozers would flatten it to the ground. She might even take the first swing herself. "Can I get you a cup of tea?" Josie asked kindly, ushering her guest through to the door of the kitchen. "How lovely, dear," said Patricia, offering Josie the sponge cake. "Thank you," said Josie as her neighbour sat warily at the kitchen table, wishing she could run an antibacterial wipe over the seat, or that her cleaner could do it for her. "Would you like a cup of tea?" Yes, thank you again," laughed Patricia. "Just as it comes. Milk in first, only 3 dunks of the bag, 2½ sugars, stirred anti-clockwise, and a small teaspoon. Silver if you have one, but I'm not fussy." "Right," said Josie, looking confused as she put the kettle on. "Thank you for the cake. Ellie will be so pleased." "Isn't he quite the young man?" said Patricia, through clenched jaws as she sprayed her palms with hand sanitizer under the table. "Oh, he's wonderful," beamed Josie. "He takes such good care of me. He's my gift." "Let's hope you keep the receipts," muttered Patricia as she looked out over the neglected fields. She could see it now. Rows upon rows of identical houses where these pointless acres now stood. Dairy Mews, that's what she'd call her development. The idiot who bought her soulless houses looked a bit of a character. Patricia felt richer just looking out of the window. "Do you take sugar?" asked Josie, assembling the tea on a tray. "Yes, please, 2½, said Patricia, trying to keep the irritation from her voice. Not only was the woman poor and lazy, she was clearly stupid as well. Josie set the tea tray down and Patricia looked in the chipped and mismatched crockery. "I was so sorry about your father-in-law, Poppet. He was such a character," Patricia grimaced, knowing perfectly well that he'd invented the horse's bum nickname that followed her around the village like one of those frightful charity collectors. "Thank you," said Josie, quietly pouring the tea. "It's been a difficult year." Patricia reluctantly accepted the stained cup, making a mental note of a wilting plant that would be grateful for the drink when Josie's back was turned. "Shall we have some cake?" she said breezily, steeling herself a prospect of another piece of Hooper crockery. "You bought the cake," said Josie cheerfully. "How lovely. Ellie will be so pleased." Under Patricia's curious gaze, Josie stood up to fetch the cake, and she had put down moments earlier. Patricia had never spent so much time with Josie before. Why on earth would she? But she didn't remember her being this dopey. "May I use your facilities?" she asked. "Of course," said Josie, rummaging around in a cutlery drawer for the big knives that Elliot had hidden. "The toilet's just down the hall on the right." Patricia shuddered at the offence word. Just because they existed didn't mean that toilets needed to be mentioned out loud. Just like famine victims or affordable houses. She left the kitchen and immediately headed for the front room. Patricia had no intentions of going to the unmentionable in this house. Heaven only knows what she'd catch from the unmentionable seat. No, she wanted to find out what was really going on at Home Farm. She peered around the homely room, which was cluttered with photographs of happier times. In a faded gold frame were Wilfred and Audrey Hooper on their wedding day. A chipped wooden frame displayed a euphoric Josie cradling the newborn Elliot. On one wall were yearly photographs of Elliot, showing the baby growing into a boy. Although Patricia observed that the most recent school photo was 2 years old, Patricia turned her nose up at this pointless tat. All the walls in Patricia's own home were painted in the essence of Penguin's belly button, and hung with expensive paintings by artists who were so exclusive that no one had ever heard of them. Papers littered every surface, and checking that Josie was still fiddling with the cutlery drawer, Patricia turned some of them over. They were all final reminders, and they came from everywhere imaginable. gas, electricity and water supplies, phone companies, the local authority, and on top of them was a really scary letter. Poking her sizable nose around the corner once more, she picked up the letter by its corner and began to read. Patricia Plum's shriveled heart danced a tango as she scanned the letter, threatening Elliot and Josie's beloved family home. She held the letter from Easy Dosh, like most people hold a winning lottery ticket. A lazy mother and that idiot child couldn't possibly find £20,000 by next Friday. But nor could Patricia allow a home farm to fall into someone else's hands. Those tiresome hoopers had been thrown out onto the street and the farm repossessed. Home farm was going to be hers. Putting the letter back where she found it, Patricia skipped round to the unmentionable, took a deep breath and flushed it with her hand inside her sleeve. That blouse would have to be burnt, but it had been worth it. Now Josie would have no choice but to sell her home farm, and for a fraction of its value. She swaggered back into the kitchen with that smile that could carve an ice sculpture. But Josie wasn't there. Patricia peered out of the open back door to see Elliot's mother in the vegetable garden pulling up weeds. Muffin Pops, your tea's getting cold," she thrilled. Josie looked up from her work and smiled warmly at her neighbour as she rose to her feet and brushed the soil off her dressing gown. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Plum. How nice of you to drop round. Would you like some tea?" Patricia leant against the door frame. The penny finally dropped. Josie Hooper wasn't being lazy or stupid or slow. She was seriously unwell. This usually bright young woman had the mind of an old lady. So that's why Elliot had been keeping her tucked away. Patricia realised that she was dealing with someone who wasn't capable of making a sound judgment on her own. Josie now needed an adolescent boy to take care of her, to make important decisions, to keep her safe from harm. The woman was utterly defenceless. There was no way Patricia could buy Home Farm for a bargain price now. It would be so much cheaper to steal it. "A cup of tea would be lovely, sweetie pie," said Patricia with a smile that almost reached her eyes. "And then after that, I thought the two of us might have a little outing."